So good morning. Welcome to how to use marketing data to drive revenue retention. I am Michelle Michaels. I lead the marketing department here at Versium. Today, I'll be joined by Matty, Versium's co-founder and CRO, Pasha Irshad, co-founder of Shape&Scale, and Leland Morris, co-founder of ContentEngine. So we also will have Tom Larson with us, our senior partnerships manager for Versium, and he's going to be supporting this in Q&A at the end.
Anyway, it's a pleasure to be here this morning. I'm Matty, co-founder and chief revenue officer of Versium. And just a little bit of background on me. I've been in the data technology industry for most of my career, going back to 2 decades now, when I worked as a founder of InfoSpace, which pioneered bringing the white and yellow pages online onto the internet. So lots of experience dealing with all the challenges around data, around identity resolution, and what that really means is finding and understanding and reaching people. And back then it was about white and yellow pages and directory searches and email directories. Today, Versium focuses on data technology solutions that help marketers leverage data to understand and reach their customers. And so today we're going to be talking about how data and data technology can be used not for customer acquisition from a perspective of marketing, but actually customer and revenue retention, which is almost more important than customer acquisition. And today I'm joined with Pasha and Leland, very fortunate to be working with these guys who work with numerous customers and clients, on both fronts, customer acquisition and retention, and are using a number of data technologies and solutions. So together we're going to talk with you about how data is used to help with retention. And so with that, I'll pass it over to you, Pasha and Leland, to introduce yourselves.
Great. I'll start. First off, it's great to be here. Great to see everybody here, and definitely happy to be here with Leland. We've been working together for quite some time. So I'm Pasha Irshad. I'm co-founder of Shape&Scale. We are a consultancy that's really dedicated to orchestrating growth for our clients in the SaaS and technology space and B2B. Our focus areas are marketing technology, HubSpot partner for 6 years, demand generation, data and analytics, and then public relations.
Awesome. Hey, great to be here with everyone as well. Pasha, always great to connect with you in person on a conference call or in a webinar like this. I'm Leland, co-founder of ContentEngine. We really specialize in automating the curation process for content and then delivering curated bodies of content really into any digital environment, be that within a CRM or a platform that people log into for marketing application, business intelligence, user enhancement, whatever that may be. Fun fact, I'm a CIA grad, really good cook, and love to enjoy some rum now and then. So anybody's welcome to hit me up on LinkedIn for business talk or food and rum advice.
Virtual rum. And the smiley face you see in the bottom down there in the videos is Tom Larson. He'll be working behind the scenes today to take in any questions that arise during the presentation and make sure that we get those towards the end. So with that, we'll kick it off. Today's agenda, just briefly, we're going to talk a little bit about the importance and benefits of retention marketing, what data challenges exist in the journey of retention marketing, and how identity technology and various data technology solutions can help address and fix some of these data challenges. And then as we get to the next step, how ABM, account-based marketing, can help marketers reach the entire organization to improve net retention. And we'll get into some things around digital advertising and how that can be used as well as a channel along with other channels to help improve awareness and to build further drive retention, net retention revenue. So what is retention marketing really quickly? It's the activity a business uses to increase the likelihood of a customer purchasing again, of a customer renewing, which ultimately increases the profitability of your relationship with that customer. And it oftentimes offsets revenue that does go away, which yields net revenue retention increase. And in the SaaS world, that's hugely important because revenues build on top of subscriptions that are recurring. So retention marketing is crucial to maintain the value of the organization in many businesses. When you think about why it's important, over the past 5 years, for both B2B and B2C businesses, customer acquisitions costs have gone up by nearly 50%. And that just shows that it's more expensive to get a new customer than it is to keep an existing customer. Existing customers are more likely to buy than new customers by a rate of 9 times. So focusing on those folks is easier to drive additional revenue, in fact, than getting new customers. According to Bain & Company, it costs 7 times as much to attract a new customer as it does to retain an existing customer. So focusing on retention is actually a lower cost effort, and it yields greater benefit in the long run. 63% of customer churn can be attributed to customers not feeling appreciated, not being helped, and lack of value perception. And so it's crucial that marketing not just is used for getting the customer, but how do you reinforce the value that you're delivering? How do you maintain the relationship? How do you give them a meaningful content, information, so that churn is reduced? And that just shows the value of retention marketing. In the B2C world, we're going to be focusing primarily on B2B today, but in the B2C world, 40% of revenues come from repeat sales. So those are existing customers, and keeping them happy is very important. Yet, as we think of all this value, 70% of businesses say that their retention marketing is average at best. So they're not doing the best job they can. And there's a lot of reasons for that. I think data becomes a huge portion of it. How do you know who you're speaking to? Things are dynamic and they change. Maybe I'll pause here for a second and just let some of my co-presenters speak. Pasha, what are some of the things you're seeing? I mean, just to kind of reinforce some of the points made with your clients and customers relative to retention marketing, and is this consistent with some of your experiences with your clients?
Yeah, I mean, first, let's start with just the stats, right? Like some of those stats you talked about were really pertinent, but if you look at it, really most SaaS organizations don't start to reach profitability till year 2 and 3, right? And I think there is an over-reliance. And again, I talk to a lot of seed up to like Series C clients and just having conversations. There is an over-reliance and an over-focus on that net new logo, right? Like acquisition, net new logo, more in that top of the funnel. The reality is, and this is based on a Winning by Design report, really 75% of SaaS revenue is going to come from those future years, right? So how can we create an infrastructure? And this is what I do with our clients. How do we create an infrastructure that identifies the moment of impact post-sale and puts in place a structure to support a strategy to really retain customers, to upsell customers, and support customers? I just had a conversation today with one of my clients and a friend where we were talking about the strategy for Q4. Here's the reality, right? Marketers have a lot of things on their plate. They sit in their role, and they sit in one or client-facing department, but sometimes they have to oversee multiple touch points within that across different departments. And so within that, it becomes very hard to say, hey, let's take a break and let's actually look at the data that we have on hand. So let's look at the customers we have on hand, and let's create a strategy that actually supports that compounding growth, which is going to fuel your revenue. So again, to reiterate what I see, most startups going up, to Series C, they see a lot of pressure on the net new logo. And I think sometimes there isn't that strategy to overlay on top of all the different tools and technologies that we have to bring about that compounding effect of recurring revenue.
Yeah, Pasha, you make some great points. I'll throw in something that we've seen really pop up lately, specifically with some of our SaaS clients, and that's really bullet point number 4. I think that a lot of SaaS product providers are very interested in delivering beyond expectations these days. So if their platform delivers a core functionality to their user base, what are those other things that sit on the periphery that can help create greater dwell time, just greater value extracted out of using that platform? And then interestingly, what we're also hearing is, how do we communicate about these new bells and whistles that we've added to our product or platform? how do we communicate about these new functionalities that we've added outside of just the user base? How do we make sure that leadership within organizations that are paying for, licenses of our tool, how do we make sure that those business leaders also know that we're here to deliver beyond expectations, so that when that CFO or CEO is making purchase decision or budget decision for the year ahead, our tool is in that mix? And I think, the conversation today is very relevant when it comes to being able to communicate across functional area, beyond just maybe a user base, but to a larger grouping of decision makers and influencers within an organization.
Yeah, and I guess just to put a bow on it from my perspective, even just speaking from Versium's perspective, we always want to be top of mind with our customers, not just something that's used in the background, and that really that just builds up your brand advocates, which translates into referrals. And we look at it from our perspective, and when we look to grow our revenue, a third of revenue comes from new sales, a third of our revenue we look to come from existing customers, so cross-sell and upsell, and then a third coming from partners. That's sort of our ambition and goal. So that portion that comes from partners or partner referrals becomes very important. When we think about effectively doing retention marketing, marketing in today's world is really heavily reliant upon data to do as good a job as possible. And only 30% of marketers feel satisfied that their ability to create relevant experiences and do marketing with their customer data can effectively do that. And part of the problem is all of the problems we see with data. And we've seen just about everything in our decade journey here at Versium. And we think of CRM data or other marketing databases, there's a huge problem with data quality and hygiene. At some point in the journey, data was entered by a human. There's all kinds of errors, there's problems, lack of standardization, normalization, things of that nature. It's missing elements, it's not complete, it's not accessible, there are data silos, so it's not centralized. And as we get into the new privacy world, we start thinking about consent and things of that nature. So lots and lots of problems with data that prevent it from being most effectively used in retention marketing. So let's talk about CRM, customer relationship management, right? Everyone has a CRM system. We say CRM all the time, but what does it really mean? It's maintaining that relationship with the customer. And it's a software system, of course, that helps do that. It tracks the people that salespeople interact with, that operational and customer success people interact with. And really, it's your key to maintaining those contact points within your customer base. However, as we started looking into, and we deal with a lot of CRM data that gets uploaded to us for various services, capabilities, data enrichment, data hygiene, according to Salesforce, 50% of CRM data goes bad every year. And that's 50% of your customer data that becomes not usable. Experian performed a recent study that found 91% of companies suffered from outdated data, data errors, or inaccurate data. One of the largest auto dealers in the U.S. found that 63% of the emails in their CRM system were invalid and could not receive messages. Now, how are you going to communicate with your customers, send out promotional offers if you've got that much data that sits in the system that is just not usable? And on the B2B world, if you're doing B2B marketing, 51% of Americans change employers every 1 to 5 years. The average person stays at their current job only 3 years. So a couple years into the journey, that person that you built the initial relationship is no longer there in the organization. How do you maintain that relationship when you have these types of problems? So there are solutions, and the key to marketing success is good data, not just for customer acquisition, but for these conversations, these brand building, these retention activities that organizations want to do to maximize their revenue retention. And that's really where identity technology comes into play. And really, what is identity technology? It's really solutions and technologies used to determine and verify an identity of a person. And what that means from our perspective is, how do you identify and understand a person, and in the case of marketing, the person you want to build your brand with, the person you want to market your message to, and not just understand them, identify them, but effectively reach them. And that brings us to the contact data points, right? How do you reach them via email? How do you reach them via phone? How do you reach them via social platforms? And how do you reach them in broader digital? The way you reach them all comes down to the different contact points that you can have for these organizations. Guys, I mean, when we are jumping into sort of CRM data and how we fix it and some of those things, before I talk about some of the things we do there, what are some of the things you experience with your client base? I'm sure in demand gen and all the things you're doing, you're interacting with the customer's data all the time. Is that consistent with some of the experiences you've seen in terms of just the challenges with data?
Yeah, I mean, I think a big reason I've pivoted more towards marketing technology and again HubSpot over the last couple of years is exactly what you said, right? CRM is at the heart of it all. I think 3 to 4 years ago, things were a little bit different, especially as a HubSpot partner. More focused on marketing automation, but as it's matured, it's become more of a centralized platform, right, to run your revenue operations out of. And in doing so, there's a lot more visibility. So that's probably the first place I'd go. Oftentimes when I come into a situation, it can be 700 contacts or 80,000 contacts. The first thing that we do is we do an audit, right? We get a data clean dashboard to understand and give everybody visibility into where the holes are. And there's going to be holes no matter how good your processes are. And again, when we talk about SaaS and we talk about startups, you're scaling up quickly, right? You've got new people, you got new players, and people are only good as their process. The rise of RevOps, which is often mischaracterized as something else, is really revenue science, right? It's the science of predictable revenue. And within that, visibility, alignment, and process become paramount to do the things that are on the right-hand side of the slide, right? Like, let's take the first-party data away, but just, what are the processes for data cleansing? What are we using? Are we using a tool like Neverbounce, right? What are we doing to validate that data? How often is it refreshed? How do we go about enriching that data? There's obviously solutions out there, but I see it all the time, and I see it again, big and small. But I think for me, I just come back to being able to get that visibility at the outset to be able to drive decisions, and then start basing your decisions on data that actually means something and data that's not corrupted.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and that's, go ahead.
Sorry.
I was just going to say, as we think about how you use data enrichment to improve CRM data, I mean, we have an immense amount of data that our identity resolution engine taps into, so we can provide new and updated emails. So if you do hit a Neverbounce to identify your not valid emails, well, we can find replacement contact points for those same people, as well as a number of tools that will standardize and fix that data. So there's a lot of things we're doing to help CRM data. But what were you going to say, Leland?
I was just going to say, I've worked across B2C. I kind of started my career working with, paid digital for B2C programs, and then really moved or migrated my attention into B2B and also B2G. And so as I've transitioned, I've worked with a lot of clients that just have very niche needs when it comes to audience development and identification. Historically, we were fairly bound to the use of third-party data elements, from BlueKai, D&B, all of your typical third-party providers. And there are a couple of issues there. One is that, if your audience is very niche, good luck finding a good representation of that from the third-party providers. You're going to be doing a bunch of and/or statements between data elements. And by the time you build this Frankenstein of a segment for yourself, you don't really know who's in there. Having worked in data origination, I also know that the efficacy of most of those third-party segments is probably 50% at best, and that's if you're lucky. And those are typically your broader stroke, third-party elements like CISOs in Fortune 5,000 companies. Okay, great. Well, we all know as sellers and marketers, that's just not enough granularity when it comes to really building or understanding or reaching specific audience members. And then even if you really dig into how that data element was constructed and look at the real people that are behind it, and that's what I always try to resolve to, is this element, the segment represents real people, who are they? So if we can see who they are, then we understand the efficacy of the segment at hand. And oftentimes, sadly and unfortunately, when we would actually dig into who are the companies in this intent segment, who are the people in this role-based segment, you find stuff that was just across the map. I remember looking at an intent, purchase intent segment for technology, facet of technology. I don't remember specifically anymore. But we're literally pulling up companies that are defunct mom and pop level pizza joints that have been out of business for 2 years, yet they're scoring in for network traffic analysis. Something just doesn't make sense there, right? But unfortunately, you blindly begin to use these segments. What that really translates to is media spend. So as a marketer who's now fiscally responsible and probably reporting up to the CFO, you're now trying to explain why 50% of your media spend just went out the door. And so, one of the things that we've looked at is how do we evolve into a first-party data approach while not overcomplicating this? How do we make this approachable for clients and within, reach? And I think that's, exactly what we're here to talk about today. This is not a complicated process. It's right there at your fingertips. You can evolve into this kind of process today and really own and know who is in your data and what it represents.
Yeah, you're speaking our language so much there. I mean, it's these black box ad tech platforms that are around for a long time. You don't know who you're targeting, and even in the B2C world, Procter and Gamble, a few years back, there was a big article in the Wall Street Journal where they shut down 200 million of media spend because after deep analysis, they found out they were not targeting the right people. Something like 30+% of the impressions were going to bots. And there's been a lot of issues with that lack of transparency. So as you start focusing on first-party data and activating that first-party data in these different omni-channel campaigns, you're using deterministic data, factual contact points where you have full transparency that you're targeting real people. And that's really crucial. And the other thing, just to highlight something you said, which I thought is very relevant, we're going to get to in a moment, you came from the consumer data world. And we're going to have a couple slides in a moment about how consumer contact points maps to the business people you want to reach dramatically improves marketing based upon just reaching these people in different touch points using that type of data. And we'll get into that in a moment. Aside from the contact data, I know, Leland, you do a lot with custom creatives, with content creation, where you're doing these segments. It's not just about the contact points of, hey, I want as many ways of reaching the people. It's the insights that allow you to segment, these types of things, firmographics and demographics. Maybe talk a little bit about that, because the same identity technology that allows you to add additional emails, addresses, and phone numbers to reach a person or an audience, that same technology can use to layer on additional data that can help optimize conversion and so forth. Maybe talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, I'll put it into a real world example. It's actually live right now and still evolving, but one of our clients is a larger federal prime contractor. And so, we're targeting people that hold various roles, titles, seniority levels within federal agencies, as well as kind of all the .mil world. And typically, number one, again, those audiences are hard to define via third-party segmentation. When you do find third-party elements, they're wildly inaccurate because of the scale represented. We know the federal government at large employs roughly 4 million people, let's say. And so when you see, human capital management within, military branches at, 15 million, understanding that's representative of their device portfolio as well, that's just completely inaccurate. There's no way all these people are walking around with 10 devices each to get to that, scale value. But, part of how working with Versium has informed audience insights outside of just reach and activation is in our creative process, which has really been interesting. So when we build audiences within Versium, part of what we get is that insights report that helps break the audience down into specific demographics so that we can really understand, who is this audience? What do they look like? What do they care about? And those are really important facets. So back to the example with this contractor, you know, most of their creative for programmatic and paid social programs were honestly just a bunch of white guys standing around talking to a bunch of older other white guys, which is a typical kind of faux pas in the world of technology advertising. But what we found is that across the audience segments that we were building, there was very rich diversity when it came to demographic profiles of the audiences. We found, for instance, that one of our target audiences within IRS was mostly female, to the extent of about 75% female, mostly ethnically very diverse, in age range about 35 to 45 years old, as opposed to another audience that we were targeting in Air Force, which was kind of that older white guy segment. But by using those insights to inform the creative process and have the people represented in the creative actually look like the audience that we were trying to talk to, we saw our CTR jump from average for display, which was, you know, as everybody knows about, you know, 0.1% on display ads, you're doing okay, to 0.35. One, I think because of the audience accuracy that we built, you know, using Versium, using the ability to apply all of those touch points and, you know, reach people where they are, but also just in the immediate impact that it had on our creative process. I think people saw those visual cues of, hey, they're talking to me, and they were more likely to take action. And so I have to believe that the information we were able to put into action in our creative process helped with overall campaign success.
Yeah, I'd say the other thing too, at least on my end, from building digital strategies for the last 5 to 7 years, a lot of the times when you're going with that third party provider, right, it's a black box and they're building things off SIC codes. Now, I've had a similar experience to Leland with a client that was targeting senior level cybersecurity at Fiserv. And when we pulled back the data from a third party data pool, we see Radio 1 and WPGC, that's a local DC station. And if you look at it, the SIC code is very close. There's nobody on that side that's doing quality control, right? So I think one of the big things with ad tech and just big ad in general is that element of transparency that you just don't get. Being able to take that back into the hand of the strategist gives you, to what Leland said, granularity that you can trust and your client can trust, or your you know, COO or CFO can trust when you bring that data to them.
Yeah, Pasha, I think one thing that you said is really interesting is about the obfuscation of, you know, kind of what's really in that data element. And when you look at the ecosystem, especially around paid advertising, I mean, it's a monster, right? And it's built to feed itself money. And it's built to move your money from your pocket into the ad tech and publisher, you know, worlds. And the fuel of that is scale. And so that's why you see these third-party data elements just blow out the scale, because they want to give you an unlimited ability to spend into that segmentation. And again, if you just apply some common sense, you know that your audience isn't 50 million uniques in the US. You know, we're building something right now for audiologists in the US. I found a third-party data element that suggested that there were like 10 million audiologists in the US. The reality is, according to the professional licensing board that handles audiologists, there are about 13,000 active audiologists in the US. So how do you move from 13,000 to 10 million? It's not about accuracy of the data element. It's about the ecosystem's need for your spend on an unlimited basis. And so you have to really kind of be careful and distrustful, unfortunately, of what's behind that black box.
Yeah, we like to say at Versium, you know, what we try to do is help our customers identify, understand, and reach their ideal customer, and do that in a deterministic way. I want to switch over to account-based marketing, ABM, and that really is, you know, how do you market to the entire organization within the enterprise, not just the user, but the influencer, the budget approver, the buyer, you know, the management team, and so on. It's really about, you might have one contact point within a company or a customer. How do you reach all of the people there? And in the B2B world, you know, the buying journey is complex. There are multiple stakeholders, multiple approvers. You know, it's not just the user. There are many, many people you need to message to within the organization. And so the more ABM effectivity you do from a marketing perspective, the more that's going to improve retention because you're establishing brand and value with the entire buying committee, the entire organization. And one of the ways you do that is through ABM tools. You might start with a list of your customer contacts within your CRM, and you might have maybe only one or two of these. And there are tools that allow you to identify the other folks, the directors, the managers, the finance person, identify other key stakeholders in the organization, get the data of those people, add that in to your audience. And now when you're launching a digital or email campaign, you're reaching everybody in the organization. So if somebody leaves, other people know, hey, we know about our customer. We're learning. We're in constant contact. And the different ways that you might do that, obviously email is one, but in the digital marketing world, you were just talking about digital advertising and 10 million contacts and the lack of transparency in these big ad tech platforms. When we talk about B2B digital marketing, it's a real challenge. The entire ad tech ecosystem was built up to market to consumers, and I'm going to highlight some real impacts of that here in a moment. The traditional B2B marketer in a go-to-market situation has had to rely on, email, outbound calling for customer acquisitions, and emails go to spam, emails get outdated, people leave. How do you effectively reach the organization through multiple channels? And when it comes to traditionally, digital has just not effectively worked. If you think of the walled gardens, the Googles, the Facebooks, the LinkedIns, these social platforms are more consumer oriented. And when you think about of late, the COVID effect, it used to be that B2B digital audiences could be constructed through IP mapping. Now that doesn't work in a high rise where it might be multiple businesses on the same IP, high rise is relative to geofencing. I'll get to that in a moment, but IP is not deterministic. It changes. It's hard to be sure that you're reaching the right business, and you cannot filter by job function and title. You can just, hey, anybody that's on this IP might get my advertising. The other thing is lat long, where you can geofence a corporate office. Again, you can't message to different people within different functional organizations or different title ranks, and it doesn't work in high rises in that case. And so now that people are working from home, the COVID effect is real. Even though we're mostly all out of it, I'm in the office here today, but 61% of remote workers expect to be working in a hybrid environment going forward, meaning people are still going to work from home. They're not going to work in the office as much. And so how do you reach these people in their different environments when they're maybe working from a home office? So it's more important than ever to reach your customer across all digital touch points. And that means all the things they're doing in the consumer world. People are checking their LinkedIn during the day. They're checking their Facebook. They're in one of the many Google properties. And these are business people that are in there maybe for a consumer or a personal motivation, but you can still put ads in front of them, or can you, right? That's really the problem. And when you look at, I mentioned the entire ad tech ecosystem was designed to market to consumers. What that means is that the underlying contact points that allow you to reach a specific audience is mapped to maybe their personal email because they log in with that, then their business email. In the case of LinkedIn, right, it's a B2B networking social media site, but 75% of LinkedIn profiles are mapped to a person's personal email, i.e. cdmatty@yahoo, not cmatty@Versium. And so people are using their personal emails to log in. So now LinkedIn will allow you to upload a hashed or encrypted list of people you want to reach and put ads in front of, i.e. a list of emails. But if those are business emails, because you have 100,000 marketing decision makers you want to reach, you're not going to effectively find them in LinkedIn because those profiles are mapped to consumer emails. And that's how they're putting those ads in front of those specific people. It's even worse on Facebook. So if you take a list of 100,000 IT decision makers that you're trying to market to, and you want to market to them on Facebook where people are engaging in advertising, you're only going to really be able to put ads in front of 11% of them. And it's the same thing in the cookie world for broader digital. And as we all know, who knows whether the cookies are going to be here. So that's the problem that B2B marketers have when it comes to how do you reach your exact deterministic audience digitally. So this is where we get into this this consumer contact point, Leland, that you mentioned, what we call our B2B2C identity graph. And what that means is we're able to take these rich contact points, emails, addresses, phone numbers that we have at very large scale, and we can associate those to the business records. And so you have that same 100,000 marketing or IT decision makers that a B2B marketer wants to reach, or it's an ABM audience for retention, and you've got now 100,000 contacts across 7,000 companies that are your customer base, and you want to continue building awareness. If you can associate, what we typically do is 5 to 7 per additional contact points per record. So now that same list of 100,000 people with 100,000 business emails, we now have 700,000 contact points for those same people, meaning we have their personal email or 1 or 2 of those additional emails. We've got a physical address and a phone number. We encrypt all this data, so we're very privacy compliant. And now when you take that audience and upload it into Google, Facebook, and LinkedIn, you're able to achieve substantial increase in ability to reach these people. In fact, these numbers are conservative. That same audience where you might only reach 11% on Facebook, we generally see it go up to north of 90% after this B2B to C enrichment. LinkedIn goes up to 78%. Google, again, usually we see plus north of 90% versus 13. And then in broader digital, from the 30% raise to 75. And now you've got this list of people you're wanting to market to. You're trying to do retention marketing or customer acquisition. And now you can effectively reach them across the full digital spectrum. And it's really a game changer for the B2B marketer. And it's not just reach. So reach means, hey, I've got this list of 100,000 people. I want to put ads in front of them in Google and Facebook. Well, Google will say, we found now 90% of them. But at the end of the day, it's how does the advertising perform? And so this is a real test, case study we did, where we took a list of business contacts, marketed them to them on Google, and then we take that same list of business contacts, or a subset, a different set of those split in half, and we enriched it with the consumer contact points, encrypted it, and then uploaded it into Google. You'll notice we drove a 3x increase in match rate. It went from in the range of 35% to north of 90%, meaning we were able to say, Google told us, hey, we can find 3 times the volume of people to put ads in front of. But more importantly, we drove 5 times the number of impressions, because those people are actively engaging with the content, meaning within those environments, meaning there's impressions for you to put the ads in front of. It doesn't matter if you can just, hey, they're here. It's, are they generating impressions? So we drove 5 times the number of impressions. And where it gets really exciting is that we drove 10 times the level of engagement, meaning they clicked on the ads, and that means they came into your environment. They saw your marketing message. You did build the brand. And the reason for that is you're putting ads in front of them where they're active, where they're engaged, and they're clicking through. And so this is why this consumer, this B2B2C graphing, where you can take these additional touch points that are more consumer oriented and associate them to the same business people, is just really changing the games in terms of B2B marketing. And, I went through a few slides there, guys. I wanted to maybe pause and maybe talk anecdotally about some of the things you're seeing, because you guys are doing these types of things with your clients all the time. So I'll let you guys maybe comment.
I'll start first, and I'll kick it over to you, Leland. I mean, I think one thing, and this is a great slide, but the one thing you got to remember is when you go into LinkedIn and you build out an audience, or let's just take an audience of 100,000 people on LinkedIn. When it gives you basically your audience size and what you can expect. Not all of those 100,000 people are going to be, on LinkedIn during the week, right? You'll probably see 30 to 40% deprecation on that. So let's take my client who's an IT provider selling into senior IT services, Midwest. We had an audience of about, I don't know, it was a niche audience, right? They were warmed, not ready to buy yet, ingested into LinkedIn, did it initially just to test match rate, about 40% of the match rate, right? So I had an audience of about 1,000 people. Take the deprecation, you're probably going to be trying to reach maximum of 600 a week. that starts to just cloud things and make it not as relevant, right? Using Versium, we ran the same thing, and I got probably like, it was like a 90% match rate. So now all of a sudden it becomes a lot more, it becomes actually, it reaches everybody you need to, and it makes your spend so much more applicable, I think is what I was trying to say. And in doing so, obviously the results are going to go up because you're just able to hit more of that targeted audience. And then when we think about demand generation as it is today, and one of the tenets of that is treating these channels as distribution channels for your content, right? Like, attribution's broken. I was talking to a client today about it. We talk about it all the time. There's so many reasons for it. But one thing that you need to be confident of if you're moving to a demand gen model is you're reaching as much of that total relevant market as possible. And I think I just gave you an example of how that works.
Yeah. And in fact, Google, if you don't hit a minimum audience size, you can't even activate the audience. And so all of this gets in the way to be.
Yep.
Yeah, that, you know, again, having worked through data origination, I know for B2B, B2G marketers, a lot of the limitation has been because the existing data elements for, specifically ABM were, Chris, as you mentioned, really based in IP. And so with work from home, and even prior to that, the inherent flaw is a lot of IPs relate to data centers. A lot of people are using VPNs. A lot of IPs are not static. Even at an enterprise level, you can find that IPs oscillate, they change over time. So you end up with just a lot of kind of non-human targeting in that mix. And then if that is the basis of ABM, Chris, you talked about something that I think is really important. And that is reaching the right people within the companies. There's an inefficiency on the other side of it as well. If you have the luxury of being a marketer that's only after a very large enterprise, you're probably going to find IP-based segments available for the IBMs and Apples of the world. But then how do you reach the audience, when you have corporate populations of, 10, 50, 100,000 employees globally? You're wasting money now by, showing advertising to where you're messaging to all of those people. So how do you better bear down beyond just IP? And again, Chris, it comes back to what you were talking about. You really start with the people. So by aligning, role to organization and then filling in the blank of, well, who are these people actually? And then processing them through an ID graph like Versium, that gives your marketing program so much greater efficiency, as opposed to just kind of blanketing spend out there, across large organizations. The other side of it, I think, Pasha, is what you were talking about. I know you and I have dealt with this directly, where, as being a consulting organization, we always love to hear that big marketing budgets are coming through from our clients because that's a good opportunity for us. But oftentimes we're roadblocked by the fact of, if you even if you told us you had $1 million a year to put into programmatic advertising, we can only spend $100 a month because we can't identify your audience out there. And as most marketers know, you're always in this use it or lose it scenario. When budgeting comes up at the end of next year, well, what'd you spend last year? What did you produce? Do we need to reduce that budget or do we need to increase it? If you can't reach your audience, I can guarantee you the CFO is going to say, we're going to reduce your budget. You only spent 50% of what we allocated to you last year, which is really a fail on marketing. So by using a tool like this and being able to actually penetrate the audience that you have, you can effectively spend, efficiently spend, and kind of better do your job when it comes to getting your message in front of the eyeballs you're tasked with getting it in front of.
Yeah, and I want to pull this back to retention marketing because there's a way to do it, right? And so when you're thinking about this identity resolution, and I'm going to just give a CRM example. If you're working in HubSpot and you've got a pipeline that's dedicated to, let's just call it upsell or cross-sell, you're able to create like a custom lifecycle stage that might map to once, again, I call it post-sale, right? They find impact in the product that you're using. They do some type of event, either behavioral or interacting with content that allows you to start alerting like your customer support, could be sales, whatever that may be. Then you start to think about, well, now I've got this segment in my CRM of people that I know are a customer, they're engaged, they're on their way to being a super consumer. Why don't we take that same data, right? Why don't we augment it? And why don't we push that into, and this could be ABM, like an ABM specific, and I say ABM specific as it relates to the accounts that are ready for upsell, cross-sell, resell, and start pushing out advertising to them to give air cover, just like you want to give air cover to cold outbound, or just like you might want to give air cover to just generally your ICP or your total relevant market. So I think that's one area that when we talk about digital strategy, we don't ever really think about what can we do from an advertising perspective for people that are, again, post-sale, point of impact. And I call point of impact, if you're in PLG, it's the aha moment, right? Somebody's using your product, and then there's more people at that account. Well, what can we do to get to them, right? Because that's going to drive your revenue up. I would also say that, no, that's it, Leland. I think, no, this is what it was. Leland, you talked about this in our pre-meeting, and I thought it was so relevant that in today's rapid change within the hiring environment, you need to be able to get in front of people that might be replacing your contact, right? So maybe you want to talk about that so I don't steal your thunder.
No. Yeah, I was actually just going to throw it in there. It's succession planning. You know, people are moving rapidly, and it's awesome that you have the ability to reach your current contact. But I think you always need to be thinking a couple steps ahead, and just know that the person that you transact with today will not be the same person 6 months, a year from now. So how are you already seeding messaging with the person that may be an internal replacement? You're doing it through a tool like this. You're getting your messaging in front of a body of influence within the organizations that you're currently doing business with as a primary means of retention. We all know that when somebody new comes on, all of a sudden that new person wants to work with what they know and what they're comfortable with. And that means, you know, volatility in your relationship. So if you can get that successor comfortable with you before they actually even know they're the successor, your odds of retaining that client just skyrocketed. So I think it's a really important thing to talk about, just succession planning.
Absolutely. Well, I think we're coming towards the end of our slides here. You know, hopefully for the audience, you know, we covered a lot of, you know, the significance, importance of revenue or retention marketing, you know, how data can present challenges, but then also how can you use various tools and solutions to improve that data, extend that data, and then unlock the ability to activate marketing to your existing customer base. And that's really, you know, what we do as a business. We have a whole suite of data technology tools that allow our customers to gain great benefits, improve their data-driven marketing. With that, unless you guys have anything else to add, we got 10 minutes to open it up for questions. If nothing else, Pasha and Leland, I'll turn it back to you, Michelle, for questions that have come up through the presentation.
Great. Thank you, Chris and Pasha and Leland. Very educational. Definitely some great takeaways there. So we'll just get started with some questions here. Had a few roll in. Let's see here. So we did have a question just around an ID graph. We could kind of just like go over once again, how does an ID graph even work?
Yeah, well, we kind of kept it where you say, hey, we can provide additional contact points. And how do you do that, right? If a person has 3 or 4 different emails and they're different, maybe you've got Bob Smith in one, Robert Smith in another, and B Smith in yet another database or in a different environment here. How do we make sure that that's the same Bob Smith such that we can give those additional contact points to extend the reach? And the way identity graphing works is we're using deterministic mapping where we look at additional data associated with each email. So let's take maybe a physical address or some other common attribute. Address is a great example. If the same physical address is mapped to all 3 emails, well then, even though it's B Smith, Robert Smith, and Bob Smith at a Yahoo, a Gmail, and a Versium or what have you, if we can identify additional data that is common, and that's just an address is a simple example. There's all kinds of additional data. Well, we can say, oh, that's the same person. So what identity graphing is doing is looking at the identity data and mapping other data associated with the core field or piece to deterministically gain confidence that it's the same person. And now, similarly, if you want to associate demographic data, well, you might have a demographic data associated with some other contact point. Again, you key off that contact point. You say, yep, that's the same contact point for that same person. Let's bring over their age, their income level, you know, the firmographics of their business. And so that's how it ultimately works, is looking at deterministic data and being factually confident that you are mapping the data. Was there something else there somebody had? Or? No? Okay. That's essentially
great.
how it works.
Thanks, Chris. So I'm going to kind of mash a few questions together here that came through. They're fairly similar, but people are just kind of asking, with this process with data enhancement and using it within customer retention, where do you start? Where do you start? And if you could kind of go over, like, who does this work for? What types of companies, what size of companies, where do you start, and who does this work for?
Yeah, I mean, I can take that, or at least kick it off. Again, like, it just depends on I look at maturity of a company, right? So if I'm dealing with seed, Series A, I mean, chances are there's not going to be a lot of first-party data, right? And so part of that challenge with them is just creating authentic experiences to get that data, and that can obviously take time. Now, where I can speak for Versium, where it helps is when we start just modeling, modeling the total addressable market and then boiling that down to who's actually relevant, right? So you can start to find PMF and make your move to go to market and make your move to scale up. That has been very valuable for me. Obviously, as I start to, work with more mature companies, I'd say Series B on up, I've found a lot of success in exactly just what I was talking about, right? I'll take the IT service provider, a mature company, really more, they're actually like small to medium enterprise. We've seen a lot of success in not only just taking the CRM data that is actionable, and again, we determine what's actionable by the way we designate it within that CRM, and using that for a couple things, like I talked about. It's air cover, right, for outbound. It is air cover for upsell, cross-sell opportunities. And then I think, the only other thing that I would say is just really understanding culturally, there needs to be a cultural agreement in the organization on how you're going to use data, why you're using it in the way that you're using it, and what you're going to allow yourself to do with it. And just, again, I keep going back to the authentic experience, because we talk about first-party data a lot. Getting that first-party data today in B2B is a lot harder than it was 3-4 years ago, right? And that, less gating, people are much more apprehensive to give information. And so we talk about borrowing from B2C, a podcast I was on, I don't know, a month ago. Zero-party data in B2C is all the rage. And if you take an example from your favorite athletic store, 9 times out of 10, it'll be a survey that says, hey, what's your favorite fit, right? And you type it all in because you're excited to get your shorts. And now they've got a bunch of authentic data about you that they can use for personalization, and so much else. So why aren't we doing that in B2B, right? Why aren't we creating more authentic experiences where you can get just, more first-party data in a way that you can use actually to benefit your customer or your prospect?
Yeah, and I'd say just from a strictly data tools perspective, we like to think of it as first step, fix your data, cleanse it, make it better. Second step, enrich it, add more data, get more insights. Third step, activate it, right? Put those ads out there, reach out to the customer.
Great, thank you guys.
4 minutes left.
Yeah, just a couple of minutes left here. Probably one more question. This is pretty tactical. But when it comes to Versium product, Versium REACH, are there any restrictions on which advertising platforms you can send the online audience data to?
Generally not. I mean, each platform is a little bit different. When we construct a digital audience leveraging UC Graph, our system automatically formats it for each different platform. Google is different than Facebook, right? So Facebook accepts, up to 3 or 4 emails. Google accepts up to 7. LinkedIn wants the data to come in a column. It's all encrypted. Yep. And so each one is a little bit different, and some of them accept different criteria. Some of them don't accept phone numbers. And so our system automatically does all those things, so it's optimized for each platform. Did Leland or Pasha, did one of you guys have something to add there? I heard a...
I have a hard stop at 2 for a presentation, but I wanted to say the thing I like about Versium, is I use this a lot, is I'm able to cross-check the data before I ingest it for match. So I play a lot in LinkedIn. It is very helpful when I take an account list and I want to get more decision makers at that account list. I'm able to literally download that list, take a look at who's in there, cross-check in Sales Navigator and make sure everything's fine, and push it in. Like, that's huge for me. And I talked about the visibility earlier. I'm very hands-on, probably too hands-on, but like that has been a game changer for me. I've obviously used it like with some different clients, and I think that's where so much of the value comes in. And that also is just for creating audiences, right? So like if I'm working with somebody who really doesn't have a great sense of who their target audience is, instead of just getting the third party data provider that pushes through LiveRamp and then you don't ever see the data, I'm actually able to say like, hey, let's walk through this. Does this make sense? Like, no, this doesn't make sense. And that's where you start to spot those SIC code issues where, again, you could be trying to target somebody in cybersecurity, but then, Radio 1 is somehow in that SIC code. So
next slide, we just have some contact information there for each of our presenters today. If you have any questions, please reach out. And we'll be following up with any questions that we didn't get to today. A recording of this webinar will also be sent out to all attendees and everyone that registered as well. So thank you so much for your time, and thank you guys. It's been a pleasure.
Thanks, y'all. Appreciate it.
Thanks.
Bye-bye.